A wise man once said that shields are for pussies. Because why would you hide behind a shield, right? What are you so scared of, soldier? No need for things like a shield. Just pull your weapon out, go in and let your insane weapon skills do all the talk. Like an actual competent warrior. 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 The time of thinking that shields are boring and too passive is over. Today I will show you the true power of shields in Elden Ring, and we can cut it short though, because most shields simply suck in comparison to the best shield in the game. This thing. This shield is the fingerprint shield, and it really just takes all the shine there is. There is just no contest. It has the highest guard boost, the highest elemental and magic damage reduction values, 100 physical damage negation, it builds up mana's on your opponents, it's customizable, and most importantly, it is this massive slab of pure stone. Do I really need to say more? And somehow this massive slab of stone isn't only the best shield from a defensive perspective, it is also the best offensively speaking. And without joking, if you use it like that, it might even be one of the best weapons in the game. This thing deals insane damage in the setup that I'm going to show you in a second, while blocking everything that is coming your way completely, and you face roll the hardest bosses in the game like it's absolutely nothing. Oh wait, before you continue, I want to thank Core for sponsoring today's video. Core is a metaverse of free games to play, designed by the community, or you can also create your own experience to share with others. There are over 50,000 games from pretty much every genre out there: shooters, RPGs, survival, adventure, you name it. Core is completely free and available from the Epic Games store. Recently, the avatar designer was added as well, and you can now express yourself in hundreds of different ways. One of the games I specifically liked is Primal World. It's a fun RPG type of game, and I really like that it has this smooth combat style just like Elden Ring. In Primal World you can play with friends or alone and fight bosses. You fight against the ancients, and you can also complete puzzles and quests and find hidden treasure. At the same time you can gather materials to improve your equipment or get valuable loot from boxes. There's just so much to do for a free game, and that is always a plus for me. If all of that sounds good to you, then definitely check out my links in the description to play Primal World by downloading Core for free. So let's talk a little bit more about the fingerprint shield and its stats. Like I said, it has the highest guard boost out of all the shields in the game, so every time you block you lose, relatively speaking, the least amount of stamina compared to all the other shields. It has very high negation values for both physical and non-physical damage stats. In the case of physical damage, which is overall the most prevalent type of damage in the game, it is even 100% damage reduction, meaning you won't lose any HP when you get attacked. And for the non-physical damage stats, you will nullify a very big portion of the damage that you're taking. But also, like I said, the fingerprint shield is customizable, so you can replace its Asher and infuse it as you wish. And one combination that is going to define my shield build and is so powerful is infusing it with the blood affinity. But you want to get the blood affinity with the shield crash Asher. You can get the shield in the underground areas in the capital, by the way, in the Cathedral of the Forsaken to be precise. Then get the shield crash Asher that is dropped by a teardrop scarab in the Altus Plateau region right here in the Lux runes. Put the Asher while infusing it with the blood affinity, and you'll get an insanely lethal combination. Now, a bloody fingerprint shield with shield crash is in itself a weapon that you can clear the entire game with. Every time shield crash hits your opponents, you build a bloodlust on them, while at the same time hitting them with a lot of raw damage as well. And this results into a lot of damage to your opponents in just a second or two. The biggest mystery to all of this, however, is how this lump of stone somehow slashes your opponents to bleed out when you attack them with the flat, smooth front of the shield. But I'm digressing. It is somehow possible, and it's amazing because it blocks everything that comes your way simultaneously while you're dealing so much damage within mere seconds, causing you to just face roll everything. Shield Crash hits your opponents multiple times as well within those seconds, so you build up blood loss really fast on your opponents and proc bleed pretty much every time you use the Asher 4. This is also thanks to the fact that the blood affinity grants the fingerprint shield a pretty high blood loss build-up value. The shield also knocks many enemies in the game back while dealing all that damage, giving you the ability to let your opponent be in this loop of you controlling them, damaging them, controlling them, damaging them, and so forth, and with that kill some of the hardest bosses in the game very easily. By the way, it's not just good against bosses, it's amazing for clearing entire areas and dungeons, as it's a good AoE skill and you can kill entire groups of mobs within just one application of the Asher 4. What is really fun as well is that you can switch direction while you're shield crashing, giving you the opportunity to switch between enemies that are not standing right next to each other during shield crash duration and just kill all of them. It's really great to have control over any situation like that, and I can't stress it enough, but let me just say it one more time. While you're doing all of this damage to your enemies, you're blocking all of the incoming damage as well. Finally, the shield also has a madness component to it. So when you're facing other tarnished players, so in PvP for example, or the NPC invaders in PvE, you can build up madness on your enemies as well while you're building up blood loss on them. And this leads to insane combinations and just killing off enemies within one application of the Asher 4. This makes this build not only amazing in PvE, but it's even better in PvP. This build is an absolute beast build. Now, that is not all, even though it could be all, but you know me, we need to take it to the next level. So a question that comes to mind would be, what would go very well with this crazy shield and make it for us possible to use two Ashes of Wars at the same time? And if you know how the shields in Elden Ring work, they usually override the Ash of War of your weapon that you use in your main hand, unless you put the no skill Ash of War on your shield, and then you can use the Ash of War of your actual weapon. But we don't want that, because Shield Crash is amazing and we want to keep it on our shield for sure. But we want to use another weapon with another Ash of War as well, even if we decide to use our shield's Ash of War Shield Crash. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we want a weapon that fits well with this shield, and you can divide the types of possibilities into two categories basically. Category 1 being the weapons that when used while you're blocking with your shield will still expose you to incoming attacks due to the way the weapon moves or attacks your opponents. And category 2 being the weapons that when used will still leave the shield completely in front of you, making it possible for you to block all of the incoming damage as well while you're attacking with your weapon. Thrusting weapons and spears fall in the second category. These are basically the poke weapons of the game, and there are a few good options. This part is kinda preference, and you can use any of your favorite thrusting weapons or spears really, but one weapon in particular that I personally like a lot with this setup is the Cross Naginata. You can get the Cross Naginata in the Gale Tunnel in Caelid. It's in the room with the octopuses. The Cross Naginata is a spear that has a unique moveset. Basically, it slashes and pierces at the same time, and therefore it is different compared to the other spears in the game, and because of this way of attacking, it makes it a really nice weapon to use. It is also one of the spears with the longest range in the game, and it also has innate blood loss buildup. Maybe you're already seeing where I'm going, but while blocking, poke with your Naginata, and all incoming damage will be blocked as you see in the footage. And you can safely destroy your enemies just like that. It's literally the easiest way to destroy your enemies. Don't even think about dodging or anything really, just keep hitting your opponents with the Naginata. And with the setup that I will show you, your Naginata will deal insane damage while your fingerprint shield will block all of the incoming damage. Now, like I said, the Naginata has innate blood loss buildup, giving us a nice reason to infuse it with the occult affinity, and at the same time also give it seppuku, which will boost both its damage and blood loss buildup tremendously. and it's going to be crazy because you will proc bleed so fast with this setup, it's crazy. Sometimes it will literally just proc bleed every other hit. The synergy between the Fingerprint Shield and Cross Naginata is really good, as you see. Not only because the Cross Naginata deals crazy damage when you defend with your Fingerprint Shield and gives you the opportunity to shield poke, but because both of the weapons build up blood loss on your enemies as well with my build, every time they touch an enemy. And with all of this, you have a 2-in-1 build essentially, and really depending on the scenario, decide for yourself what you want to do and how you want to destroy your opponents in that particular scenario. You can go with the traditional sword and shield route, or rather spear and shield route should I say, where you use your spear for poke damage while you block everything with your Fingerprint Shield. So in that setup you use your shield as an actual shield, defensive while using your Naginata as the offensive part of the build, or you go for option 2, say f it and let the beast inside of you emerge and just start raging, dash forward with your shield to destroy whatever you're fighting with shield crash. Like I said, it depends on the situation what option you want to use, but the fact that you can attack your opponents in pretty much 2 completely different ways that synergize well with each other with this build makes it really fun to play with. Now another thing that is amazing and needs to be mentioned is this stuff. And no, that is not the magical stuff you get from your dealer every week. This is shield grease. Shield grease is amazing. Put it on your shield and your shield becomes blue. Oh my god! Something you have always wanted to have. I know you do. What it effectively does is raise all of your negation values even more with this formula, but it also raises your guard boost with another 13%. The guard boost of Fingerprint Shield is already really high and the highest out of all the shields in the game, making it almost reach a guard boost of 100, which is really nice as it means you will pretty much block incoming attacks while costing barely any stamina for you. You can craft shield grease after obtaining the Glintstone Craftsman's Cookbook number 4 that you find in Lernia right here, so very early on actually. Now you might think I don't want to craft and farm the materials for that, ain't nobody got time for that. But the things to make shield grease are root resin, crystal buds and silver tear husks, and the world is filled with these materials. There's an abundance of these things, we don't want them anymore in the world, there's so much of it. These things are the main cause for environmental crises in Elden Ring, so by all means go to the locations and pick them up. Do the world a favor. They do actually respawn at the same locations, so you can grab a lot with resetting at a nearby grace and then make like 600 shield greases in one go and get yourself covered for good. I do recommend you to get shield grease and get a lot of it, it's just so much easier to apply and has a lot more benefits. Now, how does this build really fit into a playthrough? When are you able to actually make it? Well, you can get the Cross Naginata right at the start of the game, and the Fingerprint Stone Shield somewhere in the mid game when you reach the capital. So it is more of a mid to late game build and a NG plus build. But if you're starting a new playthrough and you want to use a sword and shield setup from the start all the way to the end of a playthrough, then you can use this build as the continuation to my Juggernaut build. That build uses the best early game shield that you can pick up within like 2 minutes of starting up a new playthrough. And this build is a really good mid to late game evolved version and continuation to that build. For stats, I would go for these two stat distributions for level 125 and level 150, since I use this build as a continuation of my Juggernaut build, which started with the Vagabond class. That is the starting class I will be using with this build. 48 strength is required to wield the shield, so that's what you want in both stat distributions, and it's more than enough because as you saw, your shield does insane damage. Then we want a good portion of Arcane in both setups as well. With the values on screen, we will have a good increase in blood loss build-up for our shield as well as for our Naginata. In the case of the level 150 build, we will get all the juicy increases to blood loss build-up that happen between level 25 and level 45 with blood loss build-up. In addition, our Naginata also scales its raw damage with Arcane, so it will also deal great damage. By the way, the Madness on our shield also scales with Arcane, so that is also a stat that will get higher with more Arcane. Vigor is really up to you, since you don't actually really need Vigor with this build, considering the idea is that you just block everything and get minimal damage that way. But I would recommend 40 Vigor at least and get that first soft cap at least in both setups, so if you mess up, you don't instantly just get one-shotted. 20 mind is really more than enough, and maybe even too much, but with 20 mind I could comfortably always cast my Ashes of Wars and do everything, but it's another stat you can adjust to your liking. Then finally, I would get 28 endurance at least, so you stay in the medium load category while wielding the shield. The shield is really heavy, by the way, so it is a must to get that endurance going. And realistically, what can you expect when you have this massive chunk of stone that's like half a wall that you ripped off some ancient monument and are using as your personal shield? Yeah, we do need that endurance, and it makes us get a nice amount of stamina as well, by the way, so it is definitely recommended to get that endurance. For gear, it's really easy with this build. You only really need the white mask. The white mask will give us a nice boost to our damage output every time we proc bleed. But outside of that, I didn't really use any gear, as you see. Like I said, the idea is that you block everything, and that really just happens most of the time. So just make sure your enemy is directly in front of you, and you will be good most of the time. I just use this piece that I like the looks of, and it has something to do with blood, so yeah, it fits the theme and that kind of stuff. For talismans, this setup is really nice. First of all, get Shard of Alexander for sure. It fits amazing with Shield Crash, making it hit even harder. Then get the Lord of Blood's Exaltation talisman, which will raise our damage output every time we proc bleed. And as you saw earlier in the video, that happens really fast. So we have this nice buff pretty much always active in combat. And this also applies to the buff related to the white mask. Then the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia if you're level 150, otherwise the Millicent's Prosthesis for a level 125 build. For a level 125 build, we have a smaller budget in terms of having runes to spend on our levels, and the Millicent's Prosthesis gives you 5 dexterity to meet the requirements to wear the Cross Naginata, while only missing out on 2% of the extra damage of the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia. For level 150, however, you can just get those 5 points in dexterity with our runes, and then you want to use the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia talisman instead. It is really nice because, as you saw earlier in the video, whatever way you decide to attack with, the shield or the Naginata, your hits are fast and in succession, meaning you can climb up the tiers of this talisman quickly and get all that extra juicy damage to your damage output really easy and consistently. Then for the final talisman slot, the Turtle Talisman is a really nice option. It helps out really well with regenerating our stamina, which is nice since we will be shield poking, using our weapon, using the shield a lot, so stamina is an important resource for us. For the Flask, definitely get the Thorny Crag tier. It's exactly the same as the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, but with even higher percentages. So you definitely want to run it for exactly the same reasons that we run the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia. Then for the other crystal tier, get the Crimson Burst crystal tier. This is an amazing crystal tier for my shield build, and hear me out on why this is so good. So the moment we put on blood on our shield as a payoff for the newfound OPness, the shield lost some of our physical damage negation. We now have 95 physical damage negation instead of 100. Yes, the shield is completely useless now. Throw it away quickly. I'm just kidding. Because Crimson Burst Crystal Tier is an amazing solution to that. With 95 physical damage negation, we will now get some damage when we block physical attacks. But since our physical damage negation is still really high, obviously, it will only be a small tick usually. And what does the Crimson Burst Crystal Tier do exactly? It heals you per second, so it offsets exactly the little ticks of damage you get every time you block. And this means we get all the benefits from running a blood fingerprint stone shield, while the Crimson Burst Crystal Tier compensates for the payoff with the reduced physical damage negation on a blood fingerprint shield and really makes it a complete win-win situation. Now this crystal tier is also just in general nice, for example when an enemy hits you when you're not blocking or when you mess up, as it will give you a nice welcome heal over time. So really there are 2 reasons to run this crystal tier. Both these crystal tiers in a flask will make up for a very powerful flask. And that's everything you want to know. Have fun playing the build. Make sure to give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, click the bell thing as well, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, don't forget how to check Primal World. You can play the game by using the link in the description to download Core for free.